Hello, everybody. How is it going, Jamie? Say hi to the people.
Hey, everybody. I'm fantastic. That last game is over. We don't have to watch it anymore. And now we can do our projections and be done with the preseason.
Absolutely. And AP, I know. Go Chargers, go. You're waiting for the Arnold intro. It's not here, but we appreciate you. And we got to say hi to another person here, Spike WK. Best Chargers podcast around. Need it back. It's back. We're here. And so we're going live. We're going to do our 53-man roster projections, but look forward to a lot of really cool stuff coming up. We're going to have an announcement, I think Friday, Jamie, probably.
Yep, Friday.
Okay. We'll announce something Friday. We are all here. Make sure to come in here and yell at us in the comments. Tell us how pretty we look now that you can see our faces. Whatever you want. We're here. We're live. We appreciate everybody that came and joined us. So I think we can go ahead and get into it if you want to, or we can say hi to some more people. We got Adam G here from the UK. What's up, Adam G? And then we got, who else we got? Peter? Great to hear from just outside. Hey, good to see everybody. Make sure, again, we're going to be interactive with you guys, so feel free to comment and tell us where we're right or wrong. But I guess we have to get into our 53-man roster projections. And I saw a comment here earlier that I'm going to put up here, Jamie. So this is from 410 East Coast. Jamie, we got to start with quarterbacks, right? We're going to start with offense, quarterbacks, defense, then we'll go into special teams.
Let's get into the dumbest decision on the roster right away.
So here's 410 East Coast who says, I'll be upset if they go 3 quarterbacks.
You're
going to piss off.
You're going to be really pissed off.
410 East Coast, get ready. This is going to be bad. So hey, listen, but everybody from everywhere, we appreciate you guys. I will read this name because I know it, but Hugh Jass, thank you. Best Chargers podcast of the game. I'm hoping to hear from some other great names like Hugh Jass. All right, Jamie, let's just get right into it. Can you tell me, are the Chargers carrying 3 quarterbacks? Are you going to upset 410 East Coast or not?
I'm not the one upsetting 410 East Coast. The coaches and Tom Telesco. Let's get that straight right now. I'm not in the business of upsetting people. We're just reporting to you what is going to happen. Don't blame us. We're just the messenger.
All right. So it sounds like they're keeping 3 quarterbacks on your list.
Yeah, I mean, based on what Tom Telesco said during the game last night, and what Brandon Staley said during the post-game press conference, it sounds like they have resolved to keep 3 quarterbacks. So obviously they're going to keep Justin Herbert, Chase Daniel, and Easton Stick. I think the only real question remaining is who the primary backup will be and who will be QB3 and likely not dress most games. I still think Chase Daniel is the backup. I think having his experience in the room to help with the film study is invaluable. He knows the offense. He has a relationship with Joe Lombardi. It sounds like he and Justin Herbert have a strong relationship already as well. So I think they keep Daniel as the backup, and Easton Stick likely will not dress most games unless somebody gets sick and they need him to dress. I don't think we'll see Easton Stick playing on special teams. He's not Taysom Hill. Let's please stop comparing him to Taysom Hill.
Nobody's doing that anymore, are they?
Some people still are. And I think, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. We've talked about this, right? I think in the backup, you need somebody who offers things that help bring your young starting quarterback along. You want somebody who knows the offense. You want somebody who's been there, done that, who understands what he's seeing on the field, who can provide some leadership on the sideline, somebody who handles that clipboard really, really well. And I think Daniel is the guy for that job. And to me, if you're keeping Easton Stick because you think you're going to have a chance to develop him, I guess I just would say, to what end? You're talking about, the starting quarterback getting 85 to 90% of the practice reps during the regular season. The QB2 gets the rest of those reps. Third string quarterback is not really getting much, if any, run during the regular season practices, unless he's scout team quarterback and he's, pretending to be somebody else, the opposing quarterback in practice. So I don't think there's much development going on there. I still am not convinced there is much to develop with Easton Stick. I just saw a question pop up, somebody asking if Easton Stick is eligible for the practice squad. Yeah, he is. I think the question there is, does the team think that he would make it through waivers and make the practice squad? And it seems like they probably think he won't. I think he probably would, but it seems like they have a different opinion of it.
Yeah, it looks like Nathan agrees with you too. Yeah. So again, this is what we think the Chargers are going to do. This is not what Jamie and I would do, because Jamie and I wouldn't have 3 quarterbacks. We've talked about it on our previous 53s. We've talked about it for years about how pointless it is to keep a 3rd quarterback unless they bring some kind of wrinkle to the offense, or you can keep him as a camp arm and give the defense a different look. Unfortunately for me, it's got to be 3 quarterbacks. We know Justin Herbert's the starter. I agree with you. I think Chase Daniel is going to be the backup QB2. And, being in Lombardi's system, that's a big deal. And having that veteran presence for Justin Herbert is also a big deal for Herbert's kind of progression. Having Easton Stick as a 3rd quarterback, I mean, we saw 2 positive plays against San Francisco. He had the touchdown and then that throw down the sideline, Jalen Guyton. That was great. But other than that, there's nothing really else to write home about, especially not from last night. But Telesco said they are planning on keeping 3 quarterbacks, and so did Staley. So that's the plan right now. I hope that they get in a room and go, wait a minute, there's some guys, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, they're going to have to get cut, that maybe they deserve to be here more than a guy like Easton Stick, who they could just as easily keep on the practice squad. So this is an awful decision. Just wasting a roster spot on a 3rd quarterback just sucks to me. You could easily stash him on the practice squad, cut him. And if you don't get him, what are you really losing? If you can't bring him back on your practice squad, can you not find a camp arm, a young guy that you can bring in just as easily for Easton Stick? I mean, the development is gone. I mean, there's nothing there left to keep Easton Stick, and yet they're here and they're kind of forcing their hand and keeping 3 quarterbacks. So for Jamie and I, it's the same 3. It's Justin Herbert, Chase Daniel, and Easton Stick.
Yeah, I just think, with Stick, I know he's a good story and people want to cling to him because he's kind of the underdog and he's that 5th round pick and he had all that success at North Dakota State. To me, I just think, what are you really trying to develop? And where is the value in having 3 quarterbacks, for one thing, and 2, developing a young backup? Because Justin Herbert's going to be here, if everything goes to plan, for the next 10 to 15 years. Mm-hmm. So to what end are you really trying to develop Easton Stick? And what traits has he shown at this point that suggests that he can be anything more than a 2nd or 3rd string backup? So I think there's much more value in that backup quarterback, which is why I've been in the veteran backup quarterback, which is why I've been saying all along that's why I thought they brought Chase Daniel in. I still think that's why they brought him in. I still think that's how it plays out, but it just seems like there's some kind of an attachment to Stick, and he's going to stick around. I know, bad pun, but he's going to stick around. Hopefully, my hope here is that if they do wind up sticking to this plan and keeping 3 quarterbacks, that the plan is to wait until other teams fill out their practice squads and try to stash him on the practice squad if they're that concerned about somebody else picking him up when they waive him.
Right. So we got a question here from Christoph, who says, coaches mentioned COVID as a reason to keep 3 quarterbacks. Does that make sense? You can still keep 3 quarterbacks. You can just pick up another one when cuts happen. So it's not that they can't have 3, in my opinion, they can't have 3 quarterbacks. Keeping 3 quarterbacks on your 53 is the issue. Now, I know that, like Jamie mentioned, that you can easily just keep Stick and then slip him on the practice squad after cuts is a sneaky way of kind of, as other teams are kind of shaping their roster, you can keep the guys that you like and not give them an open season when the first 53 cuts happen. But I mean, quite honestly, you can find a 3rd quarter. Keeping 3 quarterbacks is okay as long as one of them is on your practice squad, because how many can be active game day? 2? You can't keep 3 quarterbacks active on game day. So why not have them on your practice squad? You're wasting a roster spot. What about you, Jamie?
No, I totally agree. I think the only reason to keep a 3rd quarterback in the wings is because of COVID, because you don't know if somebody's going to get sick or you have a last minute issue where somebody can't dress or play for some reason. That's the only reason to do it. But even then, you don't keep them on the 53. And I think as other teams start making their cuts, there are going to be other similar opportunities to find a 3rd quarterback who you can pick up and put on your practice squad without having to reserve a 53-man roster spot for him. But hopefully this is just some roster gamesmanship and he winds up on the practice squad. It doesn't sound like it, but hopefully that's where they're headed.
All right. Let's go on to running backs. Thanks, guys, for the comments. Appreciate the questions. I love this discussion. This is going great so far. All right, running backs. So for me, we know that Austin Eckler is obviously ready for that expanded role as the RB1. You've got Justin Jackson, who is kind of on the bubble for a lot of people. He was in that RB2 role once he came back and then got injured again. Staley did mention this week that he was impressed with the way Jackson looked in camp and the way he has worked his way back from injury. He also mentioned how Jackson was an asset as a runner, receiver, and special teams. With the emphasis on teams this year, I think Jackson stays. So we also have rookie Larry Roundtree. He's been impressive. He's made a case to be the RB2. He's kind of been in that RB2 discussion. And I know there's a lot of comments here. We'll get to that in just a second. But to me, I mean, so if you've got Roundtree, who's been impressive and should be in the discussion for RB2 right now, you've got Austin Eckler and you've got Justin Jackson, who's been injured and could be a cut candidate. The real guy who should be on the chopping block is Joshua Kelly. Even though he's going into his second year on the team and it has a new staff, I don't see them cutting the core that early. If all things were equal to me, I'm cutting Joshua Kelly. But honestly, I don't think they do that. And so I have them keeping 4 running backs: Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, and Larry Roundtree. Unfortunately, I mean, they're keeping 3 quarterbacks. So at some point there's going to be there's going to be a cut here, and that'll be coming up soon. And we'll get to fullbacks right after running backs. But how many running backs do you have, Jamie?
If we're counting fullback in the running back room, I have 4. So I have them keeping Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, and Larry Roundtree. I thought all along they would keep Joshua Kelly. And I said at the beginning, when we did our early 53-man projections, that I thought Justin Jackson had to stay healthy in order to make the roster. Just based on, that the quote you just mentioned from Brandon Staley, it sounds like they're really kind of married to Jackson being on this roster. And it sounds like the ability to contribute on special teams and the ability to be well-rounded and compete and contribute, in multiple facets of the offensive game. I think Justin Jackson, even though he has not been healthy, and even though he's missed the last 2 preseason games, I think Justin Jackson is more than likely safe just because he offers a little something that the other running backs kind of don't. And he's versatile and can play on special teams. And I have them keeping Larry Roundtree as their 3rd true running back. I have them cutting Joshua Kelly, and I have them cutting Kelly just because I think we saw it kind of in a nutshell during the game last night. He just isn't very good. Kelly does a lot of dancing. He wastes a lot of time getting to the line of scrimmage. It seems like he lacks vision. Even when there are holes there, it seems like he's slow to get to them. There isn't a lot of upfield burst. He has maybe 1 or 2 runs a game where you start to think, okay, he's starting to get it, and he's starting to pick things up, and then he goes right back to dancing in the hole. So I think that's a big issue. He missed a huge blitz pickup on the first series. I think it was the 3rd or 4th play of the first series last night that led to a fumble and a fumble return for a touchdown for Seattle. Picked up the outside blitzer instead of the inside blitzer and almost got Chase Daniel's head taken off. Coach Staley did confirm during the post-game presser that was in fact his responsibility to pick up that linebacker coming through the A-gap, and he picked up the wrong person. We've seen it. He's not a good blocker. He has not been a good runner. He has been contributing on special teams, but I just think that there are other players who are ascending at a time where he's either kind of staying flat or descending. And to me, I think Roundtree is past him on the depth chart and offers more from an explosive standpoint as a running back. We've seen Roundtree catch passes. He's had a couple good blitz pickups in the last 2 games especially, and he's been playing a lot on special teams. We even saw him return some kicks against Seattle last night. So it seems to me that the coaches are starting to trust Roundtree. So I have them keeping Eckler, Jackson, and Roundtree, and I still have them keeping Gabe Neighbors. I know he's been hurt. He has not played really in the preseason, I don't think. But he's been their primary fullback throughout camp. He is one of, if not their very best special teams player. They like him as a blocking fullback. I think he can contribute as a short yardage back. I think he also contributes as a receiver. They seem to like to split him out wide and catch passes out of the backfield. So those are my 4 running backs: Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, Larry Roundtree, and maybe the biggest surprise just because of health, Gabe Neighbors.
Okay. Yeah. So just before we move on, I apologize in the comments. We got rid of that guy. Of course, he's doing it as I was giving my running back roundup. So we're all good. Guys blocked. He's gone. So you've got Eckler, Jackson, Roundtree, Neighbors.
Correct.
I've got Eckler, Jackson, Kelly, Roundtree, no Gabe Neighbors. I would personally go your route. I just don't think Tom Telesco has the balls to cut his top of day 3 pick from a year ago, even though he has been wildly ineffective. The terrible missed block, which led to that touchdown, the defensive touchdown. I end up having them cut Gabe Neighbors only because of injury concerns, and also because Steven Anderson, and we'll get to him in a little bit, has been taking on that fullback H-back role as the 4th tight end. So to me, in a way, Neighbors is a little bit redundant, but I would 100% get rid of Joshua Kelly. If this were my 53, there's no way that he makes it. And I know that Neighbors is Herbert's best friend, and I know that Neighbors is a big key contributor on special teams. But to me, this was why they should not keep 3 quarterbacks, because I would have them keeping Gabe Neighbors. And on my 53, I have them cutting Gabe Neighbors. So that's where we differ so far on our 53.
Yeah, I think what you start to see is you've got to make a less desirable cut elsewhere by keeping that 3rd quarterback. For you, it was Neighbors. I think mine comes a little bit later, but yeah, it kind of forces your hand and costs you depth at another position where you might really need it. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and just a quick note on running backs. Darius Bradwell, probably a guy. I mean, he made some noise in camp and in the preseason. He couldn't break through on my 53, but definitely worth a look at the practice squad when they get there. So in terms of running back, Jamie, here's a question from Andy M. Any chance they just use one of them as bait? One of these running backs, maybe trade Joshua Kelly, get a late round pick for him?
I think he's talking about quarterbacks.
Any chance they said that to bait a trade for quarterbacks? Okay, so quarterbacks. Do you think anybody would make a trade for an Easton Stick? Most likely.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
And even if they did, I mean, I don't know what you're going to get. Maybe a 7th round pick, a conditional pick, something. I don't know. I just don't know that he's shown enough to warrant trading him or warrant somebody wanting to trade for him.
Yeah.
And I don't think they want to get rid of Daniel. So
right.
I think they just really believe they need to keep all 3. And maybe, hopefully, are hoping that they can stash Stick on the practice squad at some point.
Okay, so let's pretend he's talking about Joshua Kelly, because I like that scenario a little bit better. Because Easton Stick isn't going to give you anything as a conditional late round pick. I just don't think they're playing that game. They just really want to keep 3 quarterbacks. What about running back? Would you fish out somebody to pick up a Joshua Kelly? Because I mean, would.
Sure, yeah. You spent 3rd round pick on him, 4th round pick,
4th.
Spent a 4th round pick on him last year. I mean, I don't know what the value is. You're talking about a guy who lost a lot of playing time towards the middle or end of last season. I was having fumbling issues, wasn't running as hard as they thought he would, was just struggling in general. He's still having a lot of those same struggles. So I don't know what you get, but I guess something is better than nothing as opposed to just cutting him and letting him go. So maybe you make some calls and see if somebody, maybe like a Baltimore
or a Detroit with Anthony Lynn, the man who was there when they drafted Joshua Kelly.
Sure.
That's
a
great point by Jonathan.
That coaching staff doesn't seem very bright. So yeah, I'll buy that.
The one who hired Anthony Lynn isn't very bright. No, Jamie, you're being too hard on them.
I don't think so.
So, yeah, I mean, I would absolutely try to fish out a trade for Joshua Kelly. I mean, there might be a team that was high on him in the draft and see that he was kind of drafted, top of day 3 and maybe want to take a shot at him. It was 1 year in a system that obviously wasn't catered to the offense very well for the Chargers last year. And though he kind of struggled in preseason, maybe another team think they can get something out of Joshua Kelly. What about from Jason? What about Justin Jackson? trying to go out and get a trade for a guy like Justin Jackson, who has had some splash plays in real NFL game experience. Obviously, there's injury history, but you willing to trade Justin Jackson?
I mean, I'm willing to trade either one of them. I don't think
I'm not married to either.
I'm not married to either one of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I would be perfectly content with going into the season with Eckler, Roundtree, and Bradwell as the 3 running backs, because I think they complement each other much better than Eckler, Jackson, and Kelly do. So yeah, I would explore both those options for trades. I don't know what kind of value either one of them has. I mean, Jackson is always hurt.
Yeah.
So I don't know who's going to give up a pick for him. It seems more likely just because there's more tread left on the tires, and maybe another team will think that he'll fit better into their scheme with their coaches. Who knows? But sure, I would explore both, because I'm not married to either one of those guys. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think it's a great idea. They have too many running backs right now on the roster, and if they can get something in return back, that's a bonus. That's great.
Definitely.
So, all right. So before we got quarterbacks, running backs, let's move on to tight ends. How many you got them keeping?
I have them keeping 4.
Yep.
I have the Chargers keeping Jared Cook, who obviously is going to be their tight end 1 heading into the season. Excuse me. Donald Parham, Trey McKitty, who frankly I didn't see really much of anything from in the preseason.
There was a holding penalty. I did hear his name called.
He caught, I think 2 passes.
Okay.
He got 1 pass in each of the last 2 games. I know for sure he had one last week.
So don't sell him short. He got 2 catches and a holding penalty. Come on, Jamie.
I saw nothing from him. Very little, okay? I saw very little from him. But it seems like they're married to him as a blocking tight end, at least initially. They spent a 3rd-round pick on him. Even though he hasn't done much to quote-unquote earn a roster spot, they're not going to cut a 3rd-round pick. So he's going to make the team. And then Steven Anderson, a personal kind of underdog favorite of mine. He's a guy who provides a lot of special teams value, and we know they're placing an emphasis on special teams this year. We've seen him play fullback. He's played inline tight end. He's split out wide. They really tried to get him involved in the deep and intermediate passing game the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, Easton Stick had a hard time getting in the ball, so they really didn't take advantage of him being open in a lot of instances. But he was creating separation. He was getting open in the middle of the field and down the field, down the sidelines. I think there's an opportunity to make some plays with him, and just that versatility, being able to play fullback, H-back, tight end, move tight end, contribute on special teams. I think they're going to talk themselves. I think they've been trying to talk themselves into keeping him pretty much all of camp, and I don't think he's done anything to talk them out of that. So I think those are my 4 tight ends: Cook, Parham, McKitty, and Anderson. And I think that those are all pretty much locks in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, we know Jared Cook's the starter. Donald Parham, while he got banged up, played some last night. He's going to be the tight end 2. 3rd-round pick Trey McKitty isn't going anywhere, obviously. They spent a high draft pick on him, even with the limited action preseason. So those 3 are locks. Steven Anderson is probably on the bubble for most, but to me, he was on first-team special teams like you talked about. Versatile player like I was talking about earlier, and why I thought Neighbors could be expendable. He played H-back, fullback, played tight end. They got him some looks against San Francisco in the passing game. So I think he makes it as the 4th tight end. He's obviously going to have a big role on special teams. He could be the lead blocker as the fullback for Eckler at times. And as part of this tight end group, Hunter Kampmoyer was a guy that had made some noise in camp, was real close to Justin Herbert, obviously. I think he could possibly have a shot at practice squad in this group.
Kampmoyer is a guy who's been playing a lot of special teams the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be really trying to get him the ball as a receiver. The last couple games especially, seems like they're trying to find a reason to keep him on in one way or another. So, yeah, I could absolutely see him making the practice squad. I don't think he makes the 54 just because I think they value Anderson's special teams capabilities, and he's been around a little bit longer, has Anderson. So I think Kampmoyer is a guy who, he's another one, played some fullback, played some H-back, played some tight end, contributed a lot on special teams. I think he's done enough to probably be brought back for the practice squad.
Yep. Agree there. Okay, let's go to wide receivers, because this was a hot topic early on, and it's kind of fizzled out as these preseason games went on. So the guys we know that are starters: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, the rookie Joshua Palmer, again, another impressive game last night. And I think Tyron Johnson is probably a lock. So those 4 for sure. So I think it comes down to, for me, 4 guys, 2 spots: Jalen Guyton, KJ Hill, Joe Reed, and Jason Moore. I think Joe Reed is an easy cut. I think he's out. I think his best bet was to stick as a returner, but obviously KJ Hill has got all the work and he's been injured for far too long to even make a case for the 53 right now. So I've got Joe Reed out. Jason Moore, a guy who has some good plays in camp at times, but I don't think it was enough to make the 53. So I think Jason Moore is out. So Joe Reed out, Jason Moore out, which means the last two in for me is Jalen Guyton and KJ Hill. Even though Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson kind of offer the same skill set as the long strider, deep threat, I do think he gets in. He's got some vet experience, and he showed up at times during this preseason. KJ Hill, I mean, I don't know what we say here. He's been getting almost all the run on special teams as a returner. I originally thought Austin Prohl would eventually take over that role, but he got cut earlier this week, so he's out. And the team has all but handed KJ Hill that returner role in the preseason. And to me, it's not really working out. KJ Hill has not earned a roster spot, but he's going to get one handed to him. So I've got them keeping 6 wide receivers: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joshua Palmer, Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton, and then KJ Hill.
I have the same group. Based on the broadcast last night, it sounded like Guyton was a little bit more secure than Tyron Johnson was heading into that final game, the final preseason game. And I thought Tyron Johnson, who I think has had some issues with talking trash during joint practices and getting yanked off the field by Brandon Staley for attitude issues during camp, I think he kind of re-cemented his position as the 4th or 5th wide receiver, however you want to look at it.
Yeah. With
his performance last night, I think he caught 4 balls for 41 yards. He was open several times where quarterbacks missed him. I know that I can think of one in particular on a 3rd down where Daniel bounced one in front of him because he got hit from behind as he was getting rid of it. I think outside of the top 3, which my top 3 are Keenan, Mike, and Joshua Palmer, Tyron Johnson's the best route runner of the group, has the best combination of route running ability, hands, and speed, in my opinion, and just gives them more options. Guyton is pretty much just a straight line speed guy. He's not a great route runner. The hands kind of come and go, but it seems like he's cemented his spot. So that leaves the 6th spot. I also have KJ Hill making the roster. I think he makes it more out of attrition than anything. Jason Moore has been hurt. He looked good against the 49ers, but didn't practice at all this week. Like you mentioned, they already cut Austin Prohl, a guy who we both like to wind up winning the return role. Joe Reed has not been able to establish himself as a route runner. He's been hurt. Just even though I think he's the most natural return man on the roster right now, and I'd like to see him win the return job just because I think he offers worlds more in terms of speed and playmaking ability than KJ Hill does. It just seems like the team is married to KJ Hill as the return man. Now, could that change? Could they have somebody else in mind for that return 1 role, and maybe KJ Hill is just going to be depth and fill out the back of the roster? That's entirely possible. But it just seems like they've fed him the vast majority of the reps at that spot through 3 preseason games. He played the first half in each of the first 2 first preseason games, did not play last night. And then they were rotating kick to kick, punt to punt between everybody else in the second half in those last 2 preseason games. So it just seems like they're married to that. I'm not a big fan of KJ Hill. I've been pretty vocal about it on Twitter. In my opinion, I think he's a guy who, even though he's known for his route running, there isn't a whole lot of speed there. He doesn't make people miss. The hands, he dropped a lot of passes last year, and I have a big problem with him as a return man because I think he makes bad decisions, and he had issues with muffing punts last year. So I'm not a fan, but it just seems like everybody else has fallen off, kind of disappeared. They didn't really even give Hurst or Bandy a look. Guys who they basically just had stick around so that they could play in the final preseason game, but they're not going to make the roster. So, yeah, I think it's Keenan, Williams, Palmer, Guyton, Johnson, and Hill, and I think Hill winds up getting that last spot just because nobody else did anything to convince him otherwise.
Yeah, so of the game guys we've mentioned, I think Jason Moore and also Michael Bandy could get a call for a practice squad spot, maybe add Joe Reed to that as well. 3 guys the teams have talked up at one point. So could come back as a practice squad candidate. And there was one question here, which I will find. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Do you think they will try to pick up another returner from another team? And my question is absolutely. I think this is one spot that they absolutely have to get better at. And we know Nasir Adderley is going to get some returner role as a punt returner. I know that Justin Jackson was getting some return as a kick returner in camp. We'll see when the games start who they're going to put back there, but they could obviously get better at the back of this wide receiver depth chart. And they could easily replace KJ Hill with a guy that's got more speed, better returner experience. And I say they absolutely could grab somebody from another team.
Yeah, I think they have to be very active on the waiver wire once guys start getting cut, because you look at wide receiver, you look at the depth on the offensive line, some of the depth on the defensive line, and corner in particular. Those are areas where I think there's an opportunity to really improve the depth, improve special teams. Whether it's coverage teams or return teams, there's an opportunity to do something in particularly at wide receiver corner. So I think they have to be active on the waiver wire at those spots. Yeah, agreed. So you talked about offensive line, so let's get into it. Who you got them keeping? We'll go, tackles and then the interior. I have them keeping 9 offensive linemen. I have them keeping Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Ryan Lindsley, Ode Abushi, who has not been good in the preseason at all and doesn't sound like he was particularly good in camp, and Brian Bulaga. And then their depth, I have Trey Pipkins, Storm Norton, Scott Questonberry, and Brendan Hymas. I would fully expect them to be scouring the waiver wires for offensive tackle depth, veteran, proven offensive tackle depth, kind of like they did with Michael Schofield a few years ago, finding somebody who maybe can play some guard and some tackle, and it's just a little bit more reliable. I just don't think they can go into the season counting on Storm Norton or Trey Pipkins, especially Pipkins. Norton was a little bit better last night. Pipkins is brutal.
Oh, just awful. Yeah, I mean, I've got the same. We know Bulaga, Slater are the starters. I thought Tyree St. Louis could make it. He didn't make your 10, right? Did I miss it? I didn't.
I have him keeping 9. No, he didn't make it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we both had Tyree St. Louis making the roster as the 10th offensive lineman because of his versatility as a guard. I don't want to say as a good guard, but as a guard. Somebody who filled that spot, and he could play tackle. I thought his versatility could earn him a spot, but Tom Telesco had mentioned, and Brandon Staley both had mentioned about them being comfortable with 9. And I think Staley was with the quote. I don't think it was Telesco. It was Staley who said that they were comfortable keeping 9 offensive linemen. So if Slater, Bulaga are the starters, unfortunately, they got to keep Storm Norton and Trey Pipkins. Norton hasn't looked good. He didn't look good against the Rams. He took a dip against the 49ers too, but I think he's been better than Trey Pipkins. Trey Pipkins is just god awful. He has been playing way too high in the preseason, and he got beat again with just an over-under move, just a basic dip under, and he got beat again. He got beat for the safety, and then got beat again last night. With Slater, who was nursing an injury, and then you've got Brian Bulaga, who was injured a lot last year, was banged up early in training camp. They basically need bodies. So they have to keep another.
Well, they have bodies.
Right. They need more
live, capable bodies.
Right. Yeah. Well, that too. But when you think about these tackles being injured, the starters, Slater and Bulaga, they've got to have more than just Storm Norton there. So in my mind, they got to keep Trey Pipkins. They're going to keep Corey Lindsley, Ode Abuji, and Matt Filer on the inside. Scott Questonberry, I think, has been really impressive during the preseason. And Brendan Hymas has quietly been a very, very solid contributor on the offensive line. I've been really excited about the rookie. So, to me, it's the same 9. It's going to be Bulaga, Slater, Pipkins, and Norton as the tackles, Lindsley, Abuji, Filer, Questonberry, and Hymas as the last interior offensive linemen. There has been talk of guys in camp like Ryan Hunter, Nate Gilliam, and Darius Harper. They all looked awful in the preseason, but they could come back on the practice squad. This is one group, like you had alluded to a little bit earlier, that the Chargers have got to find another tackle. If not 2, they have got to get back better on the depth chart behind those starters, and they got to get better from Trey Pipkins. They got to get away from Storm Norton. So if they can, they've got to pick up a tackle, 1, if not 2, once cuts happen on Tuesday.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to circle back. I wanted to mention it, and you said it. I think Scott Questonberry has been really good in the preseason. He worked really well in tandem with both Hymas and Filer in the 49er game last week. And I think he's someone, you look at him and you look at the way he's playing right now, and granted it's preseason against second and third stringers, but this is a guy who could not sniff the field when the team had no healthy offensive lineman for the previous staff, and now he's playing really well in the preseason. Kind of gives you an idea of why that staff is no longer here. It just seemed like they dropped the ball with him, and this staff seems to have a lot more trust in Questonberry, which is refreshing and encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hold on. There's a question here from Jonathan. He's here. Do you think Hymas can kick out the right tackle?
I mean, he played left tackle and right tackle in college. I think
and Nebraska,
certainly worth exploring. He's a big guy. He's a good athlete. He's mean. I think he's got the requisite traits. Just a matter of if he can stick from an athletic and a technical standpoint. So it's something that's definitely worth exploring, and maybe trying to mix him in with the twos at tackle every once in a while, just to see how he handles himself.
Mm-hmm.
But the answer
he's
right
been
now,
great during the preseason and in camp. So I'm all for trying him out.
Yeah, anything that gives them the flexibility to not have to keep Trey Pipkins is a positive at this point.
And if you were looking at tackle cuts for guys that were available that the Chargers could upgrade, Sam Tevi not available. He tore his ACL. So I know you were looking at that name, Jamie, looking at reuniting with Sam Tevi. Were you?
I don't really think I was looking at that name, no. Pretty sure that name never crossed my mind.
Terrible break for Sam Tevi, but not a guy we were looking at anyway. And then they also announced today that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to start for the Washington Redskins week 1. So that's who the Chargers have to look forward to at week 1. So we're done with offense. We'll move on to defense. I think the only thing we have, you've got them cutting Joshua Kelly. I hope you're right. I would do that too. I just don't think Tom Telesco has the balls. I think they cut Gabe Neighbors, and that's where we differ so far on offense. So let's go on to defensive tackle. And this might be a little bit of a surprise because I've been going a different direction for defensive tackles. I've made a switch over the last couple of days. So for the interior of the defensive line, the first 4 are easy: Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Jerry Tillery, and then also Christian Covington. I think, Joseph, Jones, and Tillery have been getting rest. Whether they deserve that or not is, I guess, beyond that conversation now, because they don't, but they did. They all got rested. Christian Covington has been impressive, so he's obviously going to make it on the interior. Now, to me, it's 1 or 2 spots down to like 3 guys: Cortez Broughton, Brendan Fehoko, and Joe Gaziano. Cortez Broughton has brought it. Excuse the pun. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, that's bad.
It just came out. It just came out. I apologize. But I think, to me, I think Broughton has definitely earned himself a role with his play throughout the season. Earlier on, I thought that he was probably on the outside looking in. I think with his play during the preseason and in camp, he's just grown into a disruptor, and I think he makes the roster. So the 6th guy comes down to Joe Gaziano, Forrest Merrill. Now, Gaziano getting mixed in with the ones in camp. I think he adds some speed on the inside, but in a turn of events, I don't have them keeping Gaziano because I think they need more size inside. So I think they go with Brendan Fehoko as the 6th defensive tackle to add more bulk. They've got a 300-pounder now they can put at nose right behind Linval Joseph, opposed to Gaziano, who's 280 and kind of more of a speed rusher. I know they've got, quote-unquote, some of those guys, but more serves as a 3-5 tech, so kind of clogs up that room a little bit more. So Fehoko, the more natural fit, I've got them keeping him. I think Gaziano is obviously an easy slip in on the practice squad, and also Forrest Merrill, who was really impressive this preseason. I think both those guys made enough splash plays to convince the coaching staff to keep them on the practice squad at least. So for me, on the interior defensive lineman, I've got Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Jerry Tillery, Christian Covington, Cortez Broughton, and Brendan Fehoko. Jamie?
I also have them keeping 6. I have a different 6.
Here we go. All righty.
Like you mentioned, the first 4 are really easy: Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Jerry Tillery, and Christian Covington. I also have them keeping Cortez Broughton, who I did not have them keeping when we did our initial 53-man projection. But like you mentioned, he's become a disruptor. He's a guy who's winning with technique and with hustle. We saw him chase down a couple plays from behind against the 49ers. He's a guy who has had a couple tip passes in camp. I believe he had a tip pass which he intercepted at one point in camp. He's just making plays, and he's getting to the quarterback. And he's making plays in the run game too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I have him making it. My sixth is different than yours, and I went a little different route. I do not have them keeping Fehoko or Merrill. I think Merrill's a practice squad guy.
Right.
I have them keeping Gaziano. And my thought process here is simple. I think they have in their minds, not necessarily in my mind, but this is what they would do, not what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think they believe they have enough size with the top 4 guys in the depth chart. I don't think they're too concerned about having another nose tackle on the roster. Okay. I think they are going to look for somebody who gives them more flexibility, who can play different techniques and move up and down the line. And we have seen Gaziano play a 4 technique. We've seen him play a 5 technique. He's actually stood up and rushed the passer as an edge player during the preseason. Mm-hmm. I think he gives them the flexibility to only carry 4 edge players, which we'll get to in a minute, while also carrying 6 defensive linemen. And I think he gives them that versatility and that flexibility that they don't necessarily have to keep a 5th edge guy just for special teams reasons. So I have them keeping Joseph, Jones, Tillery, Covington, Broughton, and Joe Gaziano strictly for the versatility. I think Broughton and Gaziano give them the ability to penetrate a little bit more, get upfield, disrupt, make plays. Whereas Fehoko, I think Fehoko and Merrill, while they made some plays getting upfield, I don't think they have that slashing ability quite like Broughton and Gaziano do.
Okay, so then in that scenario, you'd think that Fehoko and Merrill would then go to the practice squad?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, so what are your thoughts? Nathan had some thoughts, but how are your thoughts on this D-line group? Are you more comfortable now than you were when they first started?
Not really.
Yeah, me neither.
I haven't seen enough. I mean, I haven't seen really anything of Jones and Tillery to think that they're going to suddenly ascend and become like stalwart defensive tackles. I have major concerns about them. I think they've been babied in camp and in the preseason, and I know that Staley said they played well in the joint practices with the 49ers and that their joint practices are much more like games and preseason games are. But I think those 2 guys need reps, and they're being treated like established, productive veterans, and they just aren't that yet. I mean, I've seen people on Twitter talking about how Tillery balled out last year. He showed up in the first 4 or 5 games, then kind of disappeared, started having some stupid penalties, and it seemed like he beat up on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string offensive linemen when they were playing teams that had offensive linemen who were hurt, and really did not show up against quality starting offensive linemen. So there is an ascension there that is needed that has not happened yet. And I mean, I don't think they're going to make any changes to this group, but I'm not overly comfortable with it. I think they're a little small. I think they're going to get run on unless they're just getting upfield and disrupting. And I think there are concerns about the productivity of Joseph as he gets older, and Tillery and Jones, just because they haven't really shown, they haven't lived up to their draft status at this point. We'll just say that.
Yeah. And obviously Chris Bernhardt has the same sentiment, thinking they'll disappear after week 3 again, like you said, week 4 or 5, but yeah, he agrees. And I've said this all off season, and I'll say it again, and probably till I'm blue in the face, that they probably should have got a defensive tackle in the draft or in free agency. Christian Covington wasn't enough, but also this group will never be as good under any other coach than Brandon Staley. So if anybody's going to get the best out of them, it's going to be Brandon Staley. And so we are going to see the best of these players this coming year. And I absolutely believe that. I trust in Brandon Staley, his system, his defense. I am all in. So while we've seen some awful defensive tackle play these last couple of years, and we've seen Jerry Tillery disappear, Justin Jones not be able to live up to that hype train he gets every single year, Linville Joseph kind of tick off as the end of his career, I think Brandon Staley will get the best out of these guys. And so we will see. I think, on paper, it doesn't excite me as much as I hoped it would. And I had hoped Staley would build out this roster, but I think Staley's got his guys. This is what he wanted. And so we're going to see week 1. I don't think they will be any better than they will this season under Staley.
Fair point. I mean, his scheme should put all of them in a better position to succeed. You're not going to see guys like Jones and Tillery having to control 2 gaps. They'll be getting upfield, trying to make plays and disrupt, which is what their strengths are, or at least that's what Tillery's strength was in college. I'm still trying to figure out what Jones's strengths were to get him drafted as high as he was. But
those third-round picks.
We're gonna have to wait and see what Staley gets out of them. So hopefully he can put them in the position to succeed, and they can take advantage of it.
Okay, so let's go on the outside. Let's talk about these edge rushers. And you said 4. I've got 4 too, so it's probably the same 4. We know Joey Bosa is the starter. He's the stud. You've got Uchenna Nwosu and Kyler Fackrell basically competing for that job on the other side of Joey Bosa. Looks like Fackrell might be taking that role. He was in camp. They're obviously going to trade off week 1, so we're not going to see one take over any spot quite yet. And then to me, Chris Rumph, who had a really, really good game last night. Just shout out to Chris Rumph. The rookie is my 4th edge rusher, which means Emeka Egbule is out. I think he does add some versatility. I love that he could play edge and stand up as a linebacker. But I don't think, even though he had some splash plays in preseason, don't get me wrong, he had the sack he had a half a sack, and then also he had that big hit on a 3rd down in the second quarter yesterday, which brought up 4th down. So he's made some splash plays, but I just don't think he makes the team. This is another guy obviously eligible for the practice squad. So I think a guy that they can slip in there. So I've got them keeping 4, Joey Bosa, Uchenna Nwosu, Kyler Fackrell, and the rookie Chris Rumph.
I had the same 4. I went into last night's game thinking that Jesse Lemonnier and Emeka Egbule had an opportunity to force their way onto the roster. Lemonnier was really, really good against the 49ers last week. Didn't really show up as well this week. He was really disruptive as an edge rusher last week and also contributed on special teams. Didn't see as much from him as a rusher this week. And Egbule, he had a couple run stuffs, got after the quarterback a couple times, flashed a few times, but I think in the end, with the team keeping 3 quarterbacks, I think this is where I had to make the more difficult cut in terms of I was at 5, now I'm at 4, because I think Egbule offers a lot on special teams, and I think the coaches would really like to keep him. But I think the missed time the last couple weeks really hurts him, as does the desire to keep 3 quarterbacks. So I think Egbule is out. I think Lemonnier is out. I think both those guys are good practice squad candidates. They'll probably get one of the 2, is my guess. But I just don't see. I don't think either one did enough consistently to warrant sticking on this roster with the team committed apparently to keeping 3 quarterbacks. I think that's where they're going to wind up hurting their depth the most. Yeah.
And over here, Jason talking about how he likes Egbule a lot. We do too. We agree here. I think he should make the practice. He should make the team. Hopefully they can keep on the practice squad, but this is what happens when you keep 3 quarterbacks. Somebody's got to hit the floor, and looks like Egbule's a cut casualty. So let's move on to the second level and talk about linebackers. How many do you have them keeping?
I have them keeping 5.
Yeah.
And I think we probably have the same 5. Nothing's really changed since we did our early projections. I have them keeping their top 4 are Kenneth Murray, Kaiser White, Drew Tranquil, and Nick Niemann. Niemann has been really, really good in the preseason. Had some pretty ugly missed tackles last night. Had an issue with some change of direction and got beat for a touchdown run at one point. But led the team in tackles, I think, in the preseason. Had a sack last night. Very, very effective on special teams. He's a guy who has done everything in his power to earn a roster spot, and I think he sticks. I think there might be some discussion about keeping Cole Christensen over the person that I'm keeping, which is Aman Agbamiga.
Mm-hmm. Good job with the pronunciation.
But I think they wind up keeping Aman based on a quote that you shared with me from Brandon Staley. I don't know if you have that handy and you want to read it, but
yeah. He said, let's see, I got it here. So Agbamiga was pushing to play yet last night. He got hurt after 3 snaps against the 49ers, was taken out. He was pushing to play last night, and Staley told him that Amon did enough in training camp to get a full evaluation. And then he added, one preseason game isn't going to make a difference in your evaluation.
He also told him something along the lines of like, we know how we feel about you, and
right. Mm-hmm.
You're getting hurt isn't going to change that,
right.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his special teams value wins out. And I think they maybe see a little bit more upside in him than they do in Cole Christensen. And you need guys like Ogbongbemiga to win these last roster spots, guys who can contribute on special teams, guys who are fighting and begging to get on the field with a sprained AC joint, guys who just scratch and claw and work to earn everything they get at every level they play at. You want those guys on the back of the roster because they keep the guys in the middle of the roster looking over their shoulder, and they become leaders eventually. So I think they wind up keeping Ogbongbemiga over Cole Christensen. So my 5 linebackers are Murray, White, Tranquil, Neiman, who I was even more impressed with in the preseason than I thought I would be, and Amen Ogbongbemiga.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously Murray, Tranquil, White are rotating with the starters, but to your point of Neiman, I mean, he was just getting more and more impressive, important reps, looking even more impressive as the training camp was going along, and he was just a tackling machine in the preseason. And he's going to be a big part of the special teams unit this year. He played some special teams last night. He is a guy that will be a big time contributor on special teams. And I mean, while he's playing in these second halves, the majority of the players don't look like they belong. Nick Neiman stood out as one of the best players on the field for the Chargers, if not the entire field on both sides. He was always active. He was a step ahead of everybody. He was playing downhill. I know he had some missed tackles last night, and he got a terrible call on that helmet-to-helmet contact call. But, I mean, he's just been totally impressive, and he's going to be a special teams stalwart. I can't wait to see him on special teams this year. He's going to improve that unit. I got the same guy as the last linebacker, the 5th one, Ogbongbemiga. I mean, you read the quote. They basically said that they've already got an evaluation of who he is as a player. Playing a 3rd preseason game isn't going to change that. So to me, that says that Staley knows what they got in a player, and Ogbongbemiga is in, and that's our guy. So it's a win-win for us and for the Chargers. And so Cole Christensen, I guess, has a possibility for a practice squad spot, a guy who played on special teams last year for the Chargers. But yeah, I've got the same 5: Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquil, Kaiser White, rookie Nick Neiman, and Amen Ogbongbemiga.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that we've seen kind of a change in roles at the top of that linebacker depth chart too. Seems like Kaiser White has kind of leapfrogged Drew Tranquil as the primary starter opposite Kenneth Murray, and Tranquil, that of course allows Tranquil to rotate in. He'll probably play a lot more nickel packages for the Chargers, and it allows him to contribute on special teams, which is something he's really, really good at. So I think it makes the team better all the way around. And that ascension of Kaiser White, his ability to take that role from Tranquil, who was, I think he had the green dot last year, if I'm not mistaken, when he got hurt, who was a leader on defense, to make that ascension and take that role from him is huge, because it speaks a lot to his work ethic and where he is now versus where he was with the previous coaching staff. Yet another point about how bad that previous coaching staff was, that they couldn't figure out how to get something out of Kaiser White.
No, maybe resurrection's too strong of a word. The rebirth of that's even the emergence
those are the
of
same things.
Is that too much?
Reemergence?
The resurrection of Kaiser White. But just the way that he's been playing, and the way that we have all hoped that Kaiser White could be, the way we saw him his first year in the NFL, and then to come into the system and just basically play his own game, not have to think so much. They just cut him loose, and that's all he needed. And now he's ramped up his role in this defense, and I absolutely love it. It's been probably one of my favorite storylines of this offseason has been the emergence of Kaiser White. So we've done second level. Let's go on the outside. Let's talk about corners. And I've got them keeping 5. The first 3 are easy: Michael Davis, Chris Harris Jr., and then the rookie Asante Samuel Jr. After that, it's kind of tough. And of course, there's 5 corners, and there's one caveat. The caveat is Ryan Smith is currently on the COVID-19 list, so he's not going to count towards the 53. So basically, the Chargers are going to get an extra roster spot. So once after cuts happen on Tuesday, they can then reactivate Ryan Smith on the list and then put him on IR, which means he'll come back sometime during the season and he can rejoin the team because he's been injured, but he's also on the COVID list. So it's not sneaky, but it's a way that they earned another extra roster spot with Ryan Smith. So you won't have to cut him, and he won't have to go to or put him on IR already. He's not going to count towards your 53. So he's not part of my list. The last two, unfortunately, are just guys that, well, one of them earned it, and the guy that earned it was Tavon Campbell. I thought that he obviously, Staley was praising him throughout camp. He got the interception against the 49ers. A guy who's playing pretty good, earned himself a fifth cornerback spot on this roster to replace Ryan Smith. The other guy, unfortunately, has got to be Brandon Faison because there just isn't anybody else. He had a really, really rough game again last night. He just does not look good. I think that guys like John Brannon, Kamon Hall made cases, but just not enough for his coaching staff. So I think they could be on the practice squad eligible, and they might think about bringing them back. But for me, the five are Michael Davis, Chris Harris Jr., Asante Samuel Jr., Tavon Campbell, and then reluctantly Brandon Faison. And this is another group like offensive line. We talk about defensive line. This is a group that they have got to get better at. Hopefully during cuts on Tuesday, they can find somebody better than a Faison or a Campbell to replace them at the back of this corner depth chart.
Yeah, I have the same five. I have the same, roster machination going on with Ryan Smith there on Tuesday being moved on to the IR.
Yeah.
Seems like a no-brainer because it allows them to bring him back at any point during the season as opposed to being done for the season if they put him on IR today or tomorrow. Campbell, I think, earned it.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here raving about Campbell saying that I love him, but the coaches have been raving about him, saying that they've referred to his big engine, that he's fast and he's big and he's strong. And they've been saying for a couple of weeks now that they feel like the game is slowing down for him. And I do feel like you're starting to see that in the preseason games to an extent. I think he had a couple pass breakups last night. He's been contributing a lot on special teams the last couple weeks. And he's been a pretty solid tackler outside of one missed tackle that I could think of against the 49ers last week, where he tried to tackle Deebo Samuel high and went flying. But other than that, I think Campbell has played pretty well and has earned a roster spot. I'd be pretty comfortable with him as the fifth corner, assuming they had somebody more experienced and a little bit more proven ahead of him. Faison, I think he's going to wind up getting that cornerback 4 spot. I don't think he's done anything to earn it. He started the preseason and camp as the starter, and now we're talking about him being the 4th or 5th corner on the roster, if that tells you anything about the camp he's had. My concern, I have the same concern I've always had with Faison. I don't think he's a very good athlete. I think he's stiff. I think he has a really hard time, and we saw it last night with change of direction. He's a lousy tackler. He's not that great in coverage. They have him as one of the primary gunners on the punt team right now, and I guess it's helping. Maybe that's probably what's going to keep him on the roster. To me, I look at John Brannon in kind of a similar light to the way that we talked about Michael Davis a few years ago when he was an undrafted free agent for the Chargers. He is a big, fast, long corner who has some ball skills. He's raw, but there's something there to be developed. And if you're talking about just sticking with Faison because he's there and because he's quote unquote proven and he's been on the roster for a few years, I would much rather roll the dice on a guy like Brannon, who maybe could become kind of a playmaker and contribute on special teams and develop him in practices. I just think there's more to work with there. There's a better athlete there. There's better speed, better ball skills. There's just more opportunity there to develop a player, whereas Faison is just kind of taking up a roster spot. I just don't think he's doing anything to deserve being on the roster. And he hasn't really progressed at all in his 3 or 4 years on the team. He's a liability. He's the guy they pick on, the opposing teams pick on when he's on the field. And he just doesn't do anything for me. So I'd rather see somebody with a higher ceiling out there taking reps and contributing on special teams. But I think the likelihood is that they'll stick with Faison. Yeah,
they will. Peter thinks that they should go with the younger guys. He agrees with you, and I agree with you too, but I just don't think the team will do it. They're high on Faison for whatever reason. They were just bragging about him early in camp, and then Asante Samuel just took that role and has run with it, thankfully. So, I mean, this is obviously a spot where guys like Brannon and Hall can make the practice squad, and hopefully during cuts, there's maybe a veteran corner or somebody that you could look at, because right now with your starters, Michael Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., and Chris Harris Jr., you're one injury away from looking at Brandon Faison on the outside or in the slot. It's wild. The depth is just not good enough there. I don't know Ryan Smith makes your special teams better. I haven't seen him play corner for the Chargers yet. He hasn't started in 2 years as a corner. So, I don't know if it gets any better when he comes back after he comes back from the COVID list or from IR or whatever they end up doing with him. But they have got to get better than Tavon Campbell and Brandon Faison at the end of that depth chart, because there's 3 starters and then there's this huge cliff after that.
Yep, I agree.
All right, so let's talk about safeties. This is a pretty easy group. Not really much argument here. So why don't you tell us the 4 that you've got?
The same 4 you have.
Yeah.
Derwin James, Nasir Adderley, Alohi Gilman, and Mark Webb. They've been asking a lot of Adderley in camp. He's been kind of the captain of the back end of the defense, making sure everybody's in the right set, of the right people are on the field, all that kind of stuff. Seems like they're really expanding his role on defense and asking a lot more of him, which is encouraging. Mm-hmm. Alohi Gilman, they've been moving around. He's been playing some deep safety, splitting the field with Adderley. I think he's played some strong safety, played some kind of star and money. They've moved him around. He's looked better and better as the preseason has gone on. Looked pretty good last night. Made a couple nice tackles. So he seems like he's secure. And then the rookie Mark Webb, he had some big hits in the preseason. He's going to contribute a lot on special teams. Mm-hmm. He's another guy. He's played some corner. He's played some deep safety. He's played some money and some star. They're throwing a lot at him and challenging him to learn multiple positions on the field. They seem very comfortable with him. I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with him playing deep safety. He seems like he's a little slow to react. He's been late on a couple of deep balls the last couple of weeks. Not really sure about that, but it seems like he's safe. So my 4 are James, Adderley, Gilman, and Webb. I think those guys are locks. I don't think Ben DeLuca did enough to make the roster. He flashed a couple times last night, maybe enough to make the practice squad, but I don't think he'll make the 53. I don't think he really ever had a shot at making the 53.
No, yeah, me neither. Same for Derwin, Nasir, Mark Webb, and Alohi Gilman. Alohi Gilman, you mentioned everything about all those players, and just a shout out to Gilman, who has looked pretty good during the preseason. Looks like a completely different player. Didn't love the draft pick when they made it. Was concerned that he didn't get any run last year with the injuries that happened. But in the preseason so far, in a small sample size, looks like a different player. Looks like he's letting loose a little bit more, not thinking about stuff, and just kind of playing downhill. So in the preseason, Gilman looked pretty good, and he's the 4th safety on the roster for me too.
Yep.
So Jonathan had a question about the O-line here. When we just kind of touch on it, Jamie mentioned a name. Michael Schofield was a cut that the Chargers made as depth. And we're talking about depth. We're not talking about starters, obviously, because the Chargers have their starters. But just to get better than get better than Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton, Chargers have got a guy like Michael Schofield. Joe Barksdale a couple of years ago was a cut that the Chargers picked up, and he became a starter. But Chargers are just looking for a 3rd or 4th tackle, and there should be a name out there available. Don't you think so, Jamie?
I do. I think
even with as bad as the O-line play has been in the NFL so far.
Yeah, I think there will be something out there. I think they'll be looking, and I don't think it will be that hard to improve over either Pipkins or Norton. So I think they'll find something.
Yeah. And just to go off Jonathan's other point about the safety depth, going into the season, we weren't ecstatic about it. We liked Mark Webb, fair enough, but he looked a lot better than I expected. I'm just speaking for me. Jamie, you can give your own opinion, but for me, I did not like Alohi Gilman in the during the draft. I didn't care for the pick at all. He's looked much better in the preseason. Mark Webb, I was fine with the draft pick. He was a 7th round pick, so I didn't have too high hopes, but he looked pretty good. And I just thought kind of a special teams contributor, but he looked pretty good on defense, playing some star in camp, and coaches have been really impressed with him. So to me, yes, I think today I'm more happy about this depth chart than I was when they, made these draft picks and going into training camp. I agree.
Yeah, I think they look much better on paper after having seen them play in the preseason than they did heading into camp. I still have some questions about Gilman and Webb from an athletic standpoint. But
for sure,
they both exceeded my expectations in the preseason. And I mean, ideally, like to say that the arrow is pointing up for both of them. So,
yeah. So there's a couple names in the chat here. Mitchell Schwartz, a guy who's available right now, the old Chiefs tackle. I don't see him coming back and not getting a starter role. What about you, Jamie?
For some reason, I want to say that he's had some serious injury problems and I think he might be retired or considering retirement.
Considering it, he hasn't done it yet.
I mean, as depth, if he wants to come back.
Oh, I mean, yeah, of course. If he wants to come back,
Yeah.
I would assume that if he's coming back because he's mulling retiring, he'd want a starter role, and there isn't one right now on the Chargers, so that's probably not in there. What about a guy like Andre Smith? Peter says wouldn't mind it as depth either. I mean, listen, the answer is probably going to be yes, because is there a guy who's worse than Trey Pipkins or Storm Norton? I mean,
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, no.
It should be a lot easier to find guys who are better than that.
Right. Yes, there are. Jamie and I, are we worse? Yeah, okay. I had to think about it for a second. Jamie and I are worse than Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton playing tackle for the NFL. So yes, there are guys that are worse.
I don't know. I have a martial arts and a wrestling background. I feel like I can wrestle some guys to the ground, and I don't know. They're both pretty bad though.
You could hold a guy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can grab a hold of a guy.
So yeah,
put him in a headlock and take him to the ground when he dips under my hands.
Yeah, I think Schwartz is probably a long shot because he'd need probably some good money and a starter role to come and think about playing football again. And Andre Smith, I mean, not a starter in the NFL so much anymore, but I mean, I don't know. He could work. So, all right, let's talk about kicker, Jamie, because this is everybody's favorite part.
Do we have to?
Special teams comes down to Vizcaino or Michael Badgley. For me, I've got Michael Badgley. He made all his kicks in preseason. Vizcaino missed his 47-yarder last night. I really don't have an opinion on this. I obviously have an opinion because I just picked one. I don't care about it. I have no stake in this game. It could be either one, and I wouldn't care. But for me, in this list, I'm going Michael Badgley. How about you?
I think they probably go with Vizcaino just because he's perceived to have a bigger leg.
That's how bored you are with this. You're yawning midway through it.
The perception is that Vizcaino has a bigger leg. He can put the ball in the end zone on kickoffs, which is something Badgley definitely can't do. I think they'll take the bigger leg and try to shape it. So I've got Vizcaino.
So, yeah. Oh, okay. All right. There we go. We differ on that. And I don't care about it. There's two guys who got cut. They are names at least. And I like Sly better than Pin. I don't even the other one, but again, these are kickers, man. I wish they'd just ban them all, to be honest with you.
Just go for two every time.
Get rid of it. We don't need it.
Just spot the ball on the 25 on kickoffs,
and you always got to go for two.
And go for two.
They talked about how bad the injuries are on these kickoffs and punt returns. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. I don't care.
Done. They're gone.
You like either of these two? I mean, obviously they got to really, really look at some of these guys that get cut. These are two names that have been popular around Twitter. I'm fine with either one of them.
Yeah, I'm not married to Badgley or Vizcaino. So if they want to give Sly or Pinheiro a chance, I'm all for it. Anybody who can put the ball in the end zone on kickoffs and between the uprights at better than 90%, 86 or 90% clip, I'm all for. Let's do it.
Yeah. You make it sound so easy too. All right. Punter, we don't even need it.
That's all they do.
That is all they do. And yet Charger kickers cannot do it. We don't need to talk about punter. They only got one on the roster. It's Ty Long. Long snapper, Cole Mazza or Matt Overton?
Mazza hasn't been healthy. I think they're going to go with Overton.
I'm with you. I agree there. Okay. We got it. So we disagree on kicker. I've got Badgley. You got Vizcaino. We disagree on the defensive line depth chart. I've got them keeping Fehoko. You've got them keeping Gaziano. And then for running back / fullback, I have them you have them cutting Joshua Kelly, which would just be absolutely beautiful. and something that I hope happens. I hope you're right on this. I have them cutting Gabe Neighbors. So that's where we differ on these 53. Anybody on the chat got any questions or anything before we get off here? We've been doing about an hour and almost 15 minutes here. If anybody's got any last questions, I just want to remind you guys, you see on the screen, obviously, Jamie's at lightning_round on Twitter. I'm at Garrett. But check us out on Friday, this coming Friday. We'll have an announcement about our new podcast schedule and how we're going to lay these things out going through this year. We really, really appreciate you guys coming back. I know that we've been gone for a while, but now we're going to try to come back better than ever and kind of rebrand ourselves a little bit more too. So we've got some exciting things coming up. Check us out on Friday. Any other comments you want to talk about, Jamie, before we get off here?
Just want to say I'm excited for the new schedule. I think we'll have a lot of new ways for people to interact with us, a lot of new content options, and some ways to connect with us, I guess. So looking forward to announcing all that on Friday, and looking forward to sharing what should be a fun season with everybody and getting the show back on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think doing it this way. So I know there's a lot of, and we've been doing podcasting for a long time. There's a lot of, how many subscribers can you get? How many downloads could you get? How many, all this other stuff. Jamie and I are having so much fun right now doing this stuff, even just doing this live on a Sunday at 11 a.m. Well, we should be getting drunk at brunch right now. Just sitting here and being with you has been so much fun. So whether there's just 6 people on the stream or 600, it doesn't matter to us because we're having so much fun with this thing. And we just love that you guys are here and you guys can talk with us and we can interact with you now a little bit more than we have in the past, where we've just sat in the room and talked to each other and then got some questions off Twitter or stuff. Having this live stuff where we can have you guys, give us questions and answer is just awesome. So we love interacting with you guys. We love being able to do this. And to me, I don't know about you, Jamie, but I'm having more fun than we did when we started to be able to do this and bring some more life to this podcast. So I love it. So thank guys for watching. There's a lot of great comments here. I really appreciate you guys. Peter talked about how he loves our insight and to have us back here. Cake Jamron said we should take calls during the podcast. I guess we could maybe do that. I think this is a pretty good way of getting your questions answered. So we're good. Jason says he missed us. He's glad we're back. Now is the time. Enjoyed it. Thank you. So we appreciate you guys. Other than that, that's our 53. We are so glad we're here. And let's see here. Alex will go out on this. We just need Pipkins to be cut and all would be good in the world. Yes. Everything is great. All right.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. And like Garrett said, it's a lot of fun being back. And I think you guys will really enjoy what we have in store for you because we've been doing this for a long time. And we're going to start switching things up and freshening things up for you guys, giving you more of what you want. So hopefully you guys will stick around for that and it'll be a lot of fun.
All right. Ole, we love you guys. Cheers. Thank you so much. We are going to see you next time. Thank you, Christoph Selvin. Thank you for always listening. You
should
wrong.
Always agree with us, though.
Yeah. That's the problem. Is that you don't agree with us? So get on that. Agree with us more, please, and then you'll be right more often. That's really what that's about.
Being right is fun.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time Friday. Tune into Twitter, our Facebook, our everything, because we're broadcasting everywhere now. We'll have some news that we're gonna talk about with our new recording schedule. Appreciate you guys. Love ya. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.